Hey guys, welcome back for another episode of The Suited Shootist. And as you can tell, I'm going to be doing something a little bit different this week. What I wanted to touch on was, after some conversations with some folks, I kind of came to a realization and a bit of a parallel that I think might help to contextualize stuff for some folks. So, kind of when it came to like the precision rifle world, you know how they used to say you should at least spend as much on your scope as you should on your rifle? Well, I've realized that you should be spending as much on your suits as you do on your guns. In the kind of in the vein of that, today I'm wearing one of my favorite canali jackets and a very nice Loro Piana dress shirt. Some of the nicer elements of my closet, because I wanted to kind of help to contextualize this. Typically, it's kind of tacky when you name drop like that, but I wanted to highlight where the similarities lie. So let's jump right into it. So at the entry level, when it comes to handguns, typically that's your $150 to $300 arena. And if you've been in the firearm space for any period of time, generally the names that you hear when it comes to that price point is going to be stuff like High Point, Taurus, Keltec, SCCY, etc. These are not generally very well-respected brands. And for the most part, it's for good reason. Generally speaking, the quality control that goes into them is sometimes non-existent, and the thought process from the manufacturer is generally going to be that the user is not going to be using it that much. So they're banking on somebody buying this thing, using it a couple times a year, and otherwise it's just getting stuck in a drawer. Does that sound familiar? For a lot of you folks, I would be willing to venture that is typically how you view your suits. And if that's the case, cool, fine. Usually speaking, in that $150 to $300 price point, what you're going to be finding is department store suits, your larger, more recognized menswear stores like Joseph Bank, Men's Warehouse, and like K&G. I have less than favorable opinions on all of them from personal experience, so I'm not going to go into too much depth there, but suffice to say, I think there are better places to spend your money. The idea is just like with the guns. These are not designed for regular use. This is the kind of the couple times a year for weddings and funerals and maybe a job interview, where otherwise it's just collecting dust in the closet. And realistically speaking, if you're only going to wear a suit a couple times a year, yeah, a couple $100 is not necessarily inappropriate to spend. Still make sure that you get it tailored, though, because a cheap, well-tailored suit is leaps and bounds more preferable than a high-quality, expensive suit that doesn't fit you well. Definitely something to kind of keep in mind when it comes to all of this, because we're just talking about kind of the foundation quality. But that's not to say that just because you spent money on it means it's going to look good on you. So just something to remember. The next step up is going to be kind of your safe bets, your general purpose category. And this is where most folks tend to fall. This is probably going to be about the $500 to $700 range. And when it comes to firearms, this is where this is going to start becoming the very recognizable brand. So it's going to be your Glocks, your Walthers, your Berettas, Smith & Wesson M&Ps. That realm is where a lot of stuff lies. And again, same thing. Good, utilitarian, nothing particularly sexy, not a whole lot of variety when it comes to features, but a good, functional, out-of-the-box solution. On the suit side of things, this is really where, especially in the last few years, kind of the online made-to-measure arena has really kind of jumped out as a really viable option. And honestly, from most folks, I think that this is where you're going to get the most mileage, because there's companies like Suit Supply that does have brick and mortar. There's other companies like Spear and McKay, which I've heard spoken of very highly by Sartorial Talks, as well as Oliver Wicks. All of these also offer kind of made-to-measure options that you can order online, have shipped to you, and then have final alterations done. They fit the bill. So if you are in a white-collar job where you are having to wear suits periodically or regularly, or if you are just trying to expand your wardrobe but aren't trying to throw a ton of money at it, these are a good viable option for you. And really what it's going to do is it's going to cover all your bases in terms of what you actually need. You're not going to have a ton of customizability. You'll have a handful of fabrics to pick from. You're going to have a handful of options in terms of like the lapel cut, you know, maybe the buttonholes and things like that. But for the most part, it's going to be your greatest hits. So it's going to be your blues, your grays, maybe a couple of earth tones. Nothing that is really going to make a statement, but something that would be almost universally appropriate to pull out of the closet and go just about anywhere. The next level up from that is where we get into kind of the aggressive hobbyist. This is the stuff that is Instagram worthy, and this is where you start spending some money. This is the $1,000 to $2,000 price point. On the on the pistol side of the equation, this is where you start getting into flexing on the pores. These are going to be the HKs. These are going to be the Langdon Berettas. These are going to be custom options from groups like Boresight or Wilson Combat, stuff like that. Some of them are going to be customized and ready to ship. Some of them are going to be a little bit more made to measure in that regard. But this is that realm where people who truly have a passion for this are going to start spending their money. On the suit side of the equation, this is going to start kind of dovetailing, because there are some companies like Suit Supply and Oliver Wicks that straddle that arena. They've got some entry-level stuff that is accessible at a good price point, a good value, and then once you start kind of getting those chops and you want something that's got a little bit more personality to it, that's a little bit more customized, then they offer that as well. If you're looking at more off-the-rack solutions, that's going to be where brands like Canali come into play, or like Ralph Lauren's Purple Label specifically. You got to be careful with fashion brands, because Ralph Lauren, Armani, and stuff like that, they have different tiers at different price points and different levels of quality. So when I say the Purple Label specifically, that's something to pay attention to. And really what you're getting here is more attention to detail in the base construction and a lot more option as well. Just using this jacket as an example, while these are not functional or finished buttonholes, they are at least stitched, and it's not just the button sewn to the cuff. Little accents like that. Now, it makes alteration a little bit more complicated, because if it doesn't fit you off the rack, you can't just hem the cuff, because this gets too short. So all of a sudden, the sleeve has to come off, and it gets shortened at the top, which gives you a better fit, but it's also going to be a little more costly. So if you are spending this kind of money, made to measure or something that is purposely built for you is going to serve you better than trying to find an off-the-rack solution, depending. I'm fairly lucky, 5'11", 230-ish pounds. With my build, generally off-the-rack stuff only requires minimal alteration. I've got a fairly conventional frame. If you don't, then this is definitely one of those instances where if you are what I like to refer to as a concentrated gentleman, or if you're kind of long and lanky, then this is where you might want to start actually going, custom or where made to measure is really going to offer you a bunch of value. Then at the top end, where this is custom, starting at about $2,000, and the sky's the limit from there. This is where companies like, on the handgun side of things, really, you're talking artisan hand-built 1911s, Chambers Custom, Wilson Combat, STI, Staccato, companies where there's a lot of attention to detail and finishing, and while they still may be mass-produced, they're not mass-produced at such a high volume that the quality degrades. So you are still getting a handmade, hand-fitted item, and it's something where you are truly getting what you pay for in regards to that. On the clothing side of the house, probably the most well-known brand that's going to fit into this tier is Tom Ford. Brunello Cucinelli, Zegna are a couple of fairly well-known options as well. But again, you got to be careful with the fashion houses, because some of them bank and rely on their brand name more heavily than they actually put quality into their product. Then, of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't give my buddy Adam Ross a shout out. He actually did some final alteration on this jacket for me, as well as has made a few shirts for me, and I've got a couple other things in the works with him as well. Having a truly custom garment made where you're talking the multiple fittings and it is quite literally tailored to your exact form, this is where a lot of people don't necessarily appreciate the value, because they're like, well, you know, I can spend less money on a garment, get it altered, and then I'll be fine. It's true, as long as the alterations are in one direction. Because obviously it's easy to make a garment smaller. You can't necessarily make it bigger. When it comes to really well-crafted made-to-measure clothing, there's enough extra material built into the various seams that it allows the wearer to gain or lose 20 pounds in either direction, and it can still be adjusted to fit without any drastic recuts. So that's just something to bear in mind, especially if you are kind of the more athletic type, where you're doing a cut for like a jiu-jitsu competition or something like that, but your normal walking around weight ain't necessarily the same as your fighting weight. Having that kind of adjustability can have some value to it. So just kind of something to keep in mind. I don't want to go into too much depth on the finer points of the mechanics of all this, but it was an interesting trend that I figured I'd kind of touch on and share. Let me know what you think. Was this interesting for you? I'm hoping that this just makes the idea a little more accessible to folks in the gun world, because just like we always hear people go, well, why should I spend X on this gun when this gun is less expensive and just as good? Ain't the case. It's very much the same with your clothing as well. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that you have to invest thousands of dollars into your wardrobe, especially if this is not how you dress on a regular basis. The idea is that, just like with optics, just like with firearms, buy once, cry once. If you're going to spend the money, you might as well spend it on the best quality possible, and then that way you get 5-10 years out of it, instead of something that you got to replace every couple. So let me know what you think. I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comments. Hope everybody has a great week. Stay safe and stay sharp.